Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hand. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkest night. You are close like no other. I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkest night. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. And I have lived in the goodness of God. Oh, this is my story. All my life you have been faithful. This is my song. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. 'Cause your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running, it keeps running after me. All my days, all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. The Lord our God is ever faithful. our side. You never left. We thank you, Jesus. We trust you, God. God, I look to you. I won't be overwhelmed. Give me vision to see things like you do. God, I look to you. You're where my help comes from. Give me wisdom. You know just what to do. I will love you, Lord, my shield. I will love you, Lord, my shield. And I will love you, Lord, my
Well, hello everyone, and good to see you here today on Winning Wednesday. We'd like to welcome you all on today. Just want to take a few minutes to welcome all those who are watching on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Instagram, however you're watching us. Of course, like to always welcome our One Place family. Thank you for joining us today as well. We are coming to you live from Birmingham, Alabama, and we just pray that you are having an awesome day on today. For those of you who are new joining us, we like to take this time out 12 noon every Wednesday to bring you some valuable information, some information to empower you, to encourage you, to inform you, or to let you know that you are a winner. And so I'm excited about the topic on today. So make sure you do us a favor. Make sure you tag 3 people. Make sure you text 5 people about the information that is going forth on today. Make sure you share it on your pages as well. We need to get this information out. And so this has been a great month. We've had some great speakers. We've had someone talk about retirement planning. That was awesome. We had a young lady talk about her organization, My Girl, that helps encourage young ladies there in the Memphis, Tennessee area. We had a cardiologist come on and talk about our heart health and how we can protect it. And so we could not close out this month by not talking about a topic relating to Black history. And so this is a topic that I love to talk about. And I'm kind of reminded of, I believe it was last year when they considered Juneteenth a holiday. And so, of course, that time is when we were considered, after that time, we considered free. We are no longer slaves. And so it not only brought on a new era of freedom, but it was supposed to create Black wealth for us as well. And after 12 generations of being enslaved, now you have 4 million African Americans who are now free. And so now they are free to hold property, to have income. We can go to college. But it seems like even after all the strides that we have made, we are still somewhat behind. And I was looking at an article the other day that talked about how during that time of the 1800s, only half of the percent of the national wealth went to African Americans. So get this now, 0.5% of the national wealth was African Americans. Today, it's only 1.5%. To me, that is not much progress when it comes to wealth. And so why is that? I know I want to know. and I know you want to know. And so we have invited Dr. Robert Weems to give us some insight about this topic and to talk about the decline of African Americans when it comes to economic development. And we have had him on here before. He is from Wichita State University. He has done a lot as far as publishing articles and book chapters, encyclopedia entries. He does community-based service. He's had numerous awards. He has a wonderful bio, but he is going to be our professor for today. So please welcome Dr. Robert Weems. Hello, Dr. Weems.
Hey, Lady Fam, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Doing great.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us on today. We want to be educated more about our history. We don't want to repeat our history. We want to educate our children, our grandchildren. So if you could please talk about your topic and tell us about the economic decline of African Americans since, I think, 1960s.
Okay, if I'm ready to share my screen.
Yes, sir.
And
family, make sure you tag 3 people. Don't forget to do that. Make sure you are texting 5 people. Make sure you are taking great notes so that you can share this with others as well.
Okay, the title of my presentation is Whatever Happened to Black Capitalism? The Decline of Public Discussion about African American Economic Development since the 1960s. And when we look at that earlier period from the mid-1960s to the mid-1970s, public discourse in the United States included meaningful discussions related to Black economic development. And these conversations were linked to 3 specific circumstances. The first circumstance was greater US government support of African American entrepreneurship. The second circumstance were the urban rebellions of the mid to late 1960s. And the final circumstance was the presidential campaign of 1968 and its aftermath. And today I'm going to talk about both the rise and the fall of African American economic development, also known in its earlier period as Black capitalism, as a high priority public policy initiative. Now, when we look at US government interest in promoting African American entrepreneurship during the 60s, one of the prominent individuals was Eugene P. Foley, who in fact was the administrator of the Small Business Administration from 1963 to 65. And again, he was a real strong advocate for government support for Black entrepreneurship. And in fact, according to a historian who has written on the SBA, he had the following assessment of Foley. Quote, Foley wanted to advance his own version of the war on poverty by promoting the establishment of Black business in the ghetto. He transformed the agency in reference to the SBA into a vehicle for social change. Now, in March of 1964, Foley convinced Congress to add a small business loan provision to Title IV of the Economic Opportunity Act. And this resulted in the establishment of a government loan program called the Economic Opportunity Loan Program that specifically targeted prospective African American entrepreneurs. Now, another US government official that was very active in promoting African American entrepreneurship during the 1960s was Abraham Venable. Venable was a specialist in the Commerce Department's Community Relations Unit. And in this capacity, Venable devised a variety of very innovative programs to enhance Black entrepreneurship. And one of his more significant ones was his 1966 athlete project that involved Black players in the NFL. Now, with this athlete project, Venable worked with Buddy Young, who was then the NFL's director of player relations. And they both encouraged the then 136 Black players in the NFL to deposit at least $1,000 each into an investment fund. And one of the things that Venable wanted to do with this athlete project was to use Black athletes who were role models in terms of their, athletic prowess. He also wanted to use their visibility in terms of being entrepreneurs and in fact serving as role models in this regard to Black youth. Now, looking at this athlete project that Venable and the Commerce Department started in the 60s, one of the first things that grew out of this was the purchase of some enterprises in Washington, D.C. First of all, we saw the purchase of a Goodyear Tire and Appliance Center. We saw the purchase of a recreation center that included a roller skating rink, an ice skating rink, a 16 to 20 lane bowling alley, and an Olympic-sized pool. And all of this was under one roof in Washington, D.C.'s African-American community. And also, this athlete project, this first enterprise they invested in was, back in the day, Imperial 400 was a major hotel chain. Now, above and beyond this government program that Abraham Venable got off the ground related to Black athletes, there was a private independent consortium of Black professional athletes, known as the Black Industrial and Economic Union, also known as the BIEU. And literally the BIEU had offices in 8 cities. And this organization included quite a few very prominent Black athletes during the 1960s. One of the more important ones was Jim Brown. And the BIEU had the motto, produce, achieve, and prosper. So when we look at the 1960s, not only do we see the federal government seeking to get Black athletes involved in entrepreneurial activities, again, to serve as role models, but also you had this independent group that had the same type of agenda. And I'm going to talk about the Office of Minority Business Enterprise a little later in the presentation. But this is a picture from a 1974 meeting of this business management fellowship program that involved NFL players. And you might be wondering, who's that woman sitting among these NFL players? And in fact, the woman sitting there was the wife of then NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle. Now, another motivation for an enhancement of interest in promoting Black economic activity during the 1960s were the urban rebellions that took place across the United States. And in fact, just during the summer of 1967 alone, there were 176 racial disturbances across the country. And even before 1967, there had been similar activities in recent years. The most noteworthy one was the Watts uprising in 1965. And when we look at what went on in 1967, what went on in Watts, we saw a lot of that Black rage was being directed at white-owned businesses in Black neighborhoods. And based upon this reality, we saw the government, in fact, seek to step up its activities to promote African-American entrepreneurship, because they saw that there appeared to be a connection between white businesses in Black neighborhoods making Black people angry. So we saw the government, in fact, seeking ways to increase Black ownership of urban economic enterprises. And in this regard, Howard J. Samuels, who first served in the government as the Undersecretary of Commerce, and he later was an administrator of the Small Business Administration, he formulated an idea that came to be known as Project Own. And this next slide is just a scene of Howard J. Samuels being sworn in as Undersecretary of Commerce. And again, later he became the administrator of the SBA. But specifically, when we look at Project Own, and this was an idea that Howard J. Samuels had when he became administrator of the Small Business Administration. Project Own focused on increasing the number of Black-owned retail establishments in Black neighborhoods across America. Now, importantly, Project Own and Samuels had the support of the American Bankers Association. We know historically, as well as now, one of the problems that African-American entrepreneurs have had to deal with was a relative lack of access to capital to get businesses off the ground or to grow existing businesses. But again, with Project Own, we had the American Bankers Association on board with this project. In August of 1968, in a letter to President Johnson, Howard J. Samuels had the following predictions regarding Project Own. First of all, at the end of fiscal year 1969, Samuels predicted that Project Own would generate 10,000 loans to prospective Black businessmen. During fiscal year 1970, that number of loans would double to 20,000 loans. And also in this letter to President Johnson, Howard J. Samuels made the point that if 20,000 business loans annually were made available to prospective Black entrepreneurs during the 1970s, this could, and this was a quote from that letter, greatly close the Black-white gap in the entrepreneurial sector of the American economy. Now, public reaction to Project Own was generally favorable. And one of the more interesting public reactions was an article written by the Black syndicated columnist William Raspberry that appeared in the Washington Post October 11th, 1968. And the title of this article was Project Own Offers Best Hope for Negro Firms. And just a couple quotes from Raspberry's article. If Samuels really has persuaded local bankers to take a new look at ghetto financing, it will go a long way towards solving the capitalization problem of Black businessmen. Barring absolute catastrophe, Project Own just might make it possible for significant numbers of Black people to enter the American mainstream without drowning in the process. Now, in looking at Project Own, to me, this represents an intriguing historical what if. You know, there's some very interesting what ifs in terms of history, and Project Own is one of the more intriguing ones in this regard. Now, again, just a little more background about what was going on in 1968, and I'm going to elaborate on that in a moment. There was an important presidential election. Project OWN, in fact, was something that was supported by the Democratic presidential candidate, Hubert Humphrey. But we know in 1968, Hubert Humphrey lost the presidential election. So that makes, again, Project OWN this interesting what if. What if Hubert Humphrey had been elected in 1968? And what if Howard J. Samuels and the SBA was really able to roll out Project OWN? How might that have changed the fortunes of Black business people in the country? But again, we'll never know because that didn't happen, but it does still represent an intriguing what if. Now, moving from the what if to the what was and what actually happened. When we talk about this notion of Black capitalism and supporting Black business from a political standpoint, Richard Nixon is generally credited with introducing this term into the national vocabulary during the 1968 presidential election. However, when we look at that campaign, all of the major candidates, both Democrat and Republican, spoke to the importance of Black business development in their campaigns. Now, I mentioned Hubert Humphrey a moment ago. In a speech that he gave to the African Methodist Episcopal Church Conference in May of 1968, his remarks included the following, quote, "Count 40 white Americans, one is a proprietor. To find one Black proprietor, count 1,000. And with rare exceptions, he is in a marginal business." Now, because Nixon ultimately won the presidency in 1968, his words and actions ultimately have received the most attention from future historians and observers. Now, when we look at Nixon and the 68 campaign and his promotion of Black capitalism, one of his most significant speeches in this regard occurred on April 25th, 1968. And this was called his Bridges to Human Dignity speech. And just an important segment from this speech. What most of the militants are asking is not for separation, but to be included in, not as supplicants, but as owners and entrepreneurs, to have a share of the wealth and a piece of the action. And this is precisely what the federal central target of the new approach ought to be. It ought to be oriented toward more Black ownership, for from this can flow the rest. Black pride, Black jobs, Black opportunity, and yes, Black power, in the best and most constructive sense of that often misapplied term. Now, in looking at what Nixon had to say, this would raise a very interesting question. What was Nixon's source of information regarding what most of the militants were asking for? Because again, how would Nixon know what Black militants were asking for? Now, during the course of research on a book that this information came from, I'm going to have an image of that book a little later in my presentation. It turns out that one of Nixon's chief economic advisors, an individual by the name of Martin Anderson, his wife had in fact written a master's thesis on the Nation of Islam. And in fact, they derived information from her master's thesis, again, to provide information to Nixon in terms of what Black militants were asking for. Now, on March 5th, 1969, Nixon kept his campaign promises regarding Black capitalism by creating the Office of Minority Business Enterprise, also known by the acronym OMBE, through Executive Order 11458. Now, it remains debatable as to just how effective OMBE was in promoting African American entrepreneurship. Now, one thing that isn't debatable is that OMBE's creation generated significant public discussion surrounding the issue of African American entrepreneurship. And as I mentioned a moment ago, the material from today's presentation came from my 2009 book, Business in Black and White, American Presidents and Black Entrepreneurs in the 20th Century. And this is a scene from March 5th, 1969, when Nixon, in fact, signed Executive Order 11458, which created the Office of Minority Business Enterprise. And these are some images of some of the first publications of the Office of Minority Business Enterprise. Now, again, when we talk about some of the reactions to, again, Nixon's discussion and other politicians' discussion about the importance of the promotion of Black business enterprises, one early manifestation of this was an event called the National Black Economic Development Conference, which was held in Detroit from April 25th to 27th of 1969. And one of the important occurrences that occurred at this particular meeting was James Forman, and James Forman was the executive secretary of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, also known as SNCC. At this meeting, Forman issued his Black Manifesto, where in fact he demanded $500 million from America's white churches for Black economic development. Also, in the aftermath of the creation of the Office of Minority Business Enterprise, we saw the appearance of Black Enterprise Magazine in 1970, which was and is a popular magazine devoted to examining issues related to Blacks in business. And also in 1970, we saw the appearance of this publication, Review of Black Political Economy, which is a scholarly journal that is still in existence, devoted to examining economic issues related to Blacks. Now, one of the realities associated with the presidency of the United States is that these individuals possess what has been called a bully pulpit. Specifically, any issue that they talk about necessarily generates a lot of public interest. And because Richard Nixon talked about Black capitalism and Black business, this necessarily generated, again, considerable public interest and discussion. Now, in the days before Google, and I guess the prehistoric era before Google, the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature was an important index of information. And in looking at the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature during this era, we get a graphic indication of how the issue of Black business development both rose and fell as a topic of widespread public discussion. Now I want to start with volume 28 of the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature, covering the period from March 1968 to February 1969. Now, in this particular volume, there were 15 listings in the category of Negro businessmen. There were no listings in the category of Black capitalism. And when you look at these 15 listings that appeared in volume 28 of the Reader's Guide, we do see them appearing in a wide variety of periodicals, including Business Week, Ebony, Harvard Business Review, Look, Nation's Business, Newsweek, and Time Magazine. Now, the next volume of the Reader's Guide of Periodical Literature, volume 29, covering March 1969 to February of 1970, we see an enhanced listing of articles related to Black business. In fact, in the previous volume, there were no listings under the category of Black capitalism. In this volume, there were 15. There are also 9 listings in the category of Negro companies and 7 listings in the category of Negro business. And again, this dramatic increase in published articles related to Black business development was directly linked to the creation of the Office of Minority Business Enterprise. Now, ironically, perhaps, when we fast forward to volume 35, covering the period from March 1975 to February 1976, there were only 2 listings in the category of Negro businessmen, 1 listing in the category of Negro companies, and there was no listing in the category of Black capitalism. And the relatively quick exit of the term Black capitalism from the nation's vocabulary indicates how Black economic development quickly declined as a national priority. And among other things, when we look at the Black militancy of the late 1960s, which in fact had motivated the US government and other interested parties to find ways to quell Black unrest, by the mid-1970s, that Black militancy had pretty much subsided. So in a very real sense, when we look at this data here, we see the government response to promoting Black business as being more of a reactionary response rather than a proactive response. Now, looking a little further into the Reader's Guide, I want to look into this publication after the disappearance of the term Black capitalism. Now, beginning with volume 37, which covered from March of 1977 to February of 1978, the Reader's Guide discontinued indexing the term Negro and Negroes. Now, subsequently, articles related to Black businesses were included in a new category of Black business enterprises. In 1979, we saw the Reader's Guide starting to index articles from Black enterprise. In 1985, we saw the Reader's Guide starting to index articles in JET. Now, the addition of Black enterprise and JET to index publications in the Reader's Guide did convey ongoing interest in Black business development. For instance, when we look at volume 44 of the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature, which covered the period from March 1984 to February 1985, there were 41 index listings in the category of Black business enterprises. And that consisted of the following: There were 23 articles from JET, 17 articles from Black Enterprise, and 1 article from Essence. Now, this data from the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature and this later data clearly conveys how interest in Black business development by the mid-1980s became almost exclusively confined to the African American community. And when we talk about larger national priorities, in fact, we see this by the 80s becoming a peripheral issue in terms of, again, the US government's top priorities. Now, in looking at substantive public discourse related to Black business development, with participation and participants from all sectors of American society. This seems to have disappeared like the Afro hairstyle. Now, notwithstanding that point, when we look around today at this particular moment, February 23rd, 2022, many of today's Black communities remain areas of economic underdevelopment. Now, because of this, it is my belief that it is worthwhile to re-examine some of the discourse and actions of the late 1960s and early 1970s to determine if any of this period's proposals related to African American economic development would still be relevant in the early 21st century. And I want to conclude on a positive note by discussing one earlier successful strategy. And again, what I'm going to talk about in a moment was not some theoretical strategy, but something that actually worked in the real world that still possesses great potential in this regard. And I want to talk about the activities of Reverend Leon Sullivan, who was an important architect of church-based economic development in the African American community. Now, Reverend Sullivan was the pastor of Philadelphia's Mount Zion Baptist Church. And Reverend Sullivan at Mount Zion started something called the 1036 Plan. Now, initially, 650 members of Mount Zion invested $10 a month for 36 months into a cooperative pool. Now, by the early 1970s, an additional 6,000 persons in Philadelphia's Black community joined the 1036 Plan. Now, with this community-generated seed money, along with support from the federal government, Reverend Sullivan's initiative resulted in a variety of important economic development endeavors. First of all, one of the things that grew out of Mount Zion's 1036 Plan was the creation of the Progress Plaza Shopping Center in Philadelphia in 1968. In fact, Progress Plaza was the first Black-owned shopping center in the United States. By the early 1970s, Progress Plaza had 17 stores, 11 were Black-owned and operated, and 6 were chain store branches that were under Black management. Another offshoot or another reverberation from the 10x36 Plan was an enterprise called Progress Aerospace Enterprises. And in fact, this manufacturing firm produced electronic components for the aerospace industry. Also, Another thing that grew out of the 10 by 36 plan was the Progress Garment Manufacturing Company, which produced clothing. And yet another part of this economic development plan was something called the Opportunities Industrialization Center, also known as the OIC. And this provided job training to individuals. And some of the persons that were trained at the Opportunities Industrialization Center, in fact, ended up working in some of the Sullivan Coordinated Enterprises, such as Progress Aerospace Enterprises and the Progress Garment Manufacturing Company. Now, there was still more. Sullivan and what I would call synergistic model of community economic development also included an apartment complex known as Zion Gardens. Now, in these challenging times that we're dealing with in 2022, there is no need to reinvent the wheel in terms of African-American economic development. Much of what needs to be done today has been done in the past. But what we do need today is someone that possesses the vision of a Reverend Sullivan, along with the resolve of ordinary citizens to, in fact, support such a vision. Again, it's my pleasure to be with you today and to present this information to you. And I'm gonna stop the screen share.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Weems. Yeah, that was a surprise at the end because that is something, Pastor Mason, that's a vision of Birmingham Bible Church, is to do something like that, to have those businesses for African Americans in the community. We've been, and we always talk about our land, our future. So it's good to know. I did not know that Reverend Sullivan did that back in the 1960s, early 70s. So you're right, things have already done before time. We just have to go research, go dig, and try to replicate what's already been done. Let me ask you this. Are there any money, because you talked about how there was, Nixon had started really trying to get black loans for African American people. Is it possible? How can we access those funds now? Can, somebody who's interested in having their own business, churches who want to acquire those type of strip malls or whatever to build, are there any funds out there now like there were back then?
Yeah, well, the Small Business Administration, remains an important source of funding. Also, the Office of Minority Business Development, 1980 morphed into the Minority Business Development Agency. So that whole governmental thrust to support, African-American entrepreneurship is alive and well. And going back to Reverend Sullivan's initiative, and to me, I think the real power of it was that when he approached, governmental officials for assistance, he came with money in hand. It wasn't like he came, with no money in hand and just asking for the government to, support Black economic development. To me, that was the shrewdest part of this plan, going with money to say, well, yeah, the community has shown its interest in economic development. And here is the concrete manifestation of that. How can you help us to grow this initiative? And to me, that's the most powerful part of this, the fact that, African Americans pooling their resources to, again, make those resources even grow larger through the support of various government agencies and foundations and the like.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, because we know that there are always some barriers that prevent African Americans from, obtaining wealth. What do you think are some? In my mind, I'm thinking, is it lack of education? Is it, is there inability to obtain job salary, the same pay as other counterparts? I mean, what do you think are some other barriers as to why we just can't seem to even out this discrepancy when it comes to Black wealth?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the real ongoing problems is just the proverbial wealth gap that in fact has grown wider between people of African descent and people of European descent in this country. Uh, and there's a variety of factors for that. Again, employment or lack thereof is an issue. We know, for instance, to look historically, that the housing crisis of 2008, 2009, a lot of Black people lost a lot of home equity, because traditionally, home equity has been a major source of our collective wealth. And when we lost that, many of us have never really been able to, recover that. Also, in starting a business, especially when you're starting a business, it's very difficult to get startup loans. So you have to, have money of your own. And traditionally, African Americans really don't have, the amount of money that their white counterparts have, either from themselves or from friends or family. So yeah, issues of just capital and resources that have been historic issues, remain relevant in 2022. And that's where, from my perspective, we have to be a bit more creative in terms of pooling the resources that we have. Because again, and just an example of that, as a people, our collective spending power is over $1 trillion. So, we have income, and large sums of collective income. But if we could figure out ways to use more of that collective income to work in our best interest, rather than helping to, buttress the bottom line of major corporations, that would definitely help us move a long way toward, substantive, a community-based economic development.
Yeah. And that goes back to, we need to really try to spend monies in our communities. We support Black businesses because we know we are a Black business. And so it takes a lot to keep and sustain. But just getting that money to turn over in the community. And a lot of times, we'll go outside of other areas to spend our dollars when we can support, our very own. And what are your thoughts on that, as far as making sure that we are supportive of one another too?
Oh, that's the key, because I've written, one of my books is on African American consumerism. And when you look at some of the historic Black communities, say, Greenwood District in Tulsa is
Yeah.
an example of how a dollar circulated several times
Mhm.
in that community. Whereas today, most Black dollars make a quick one-way exit
That's it.
out of the community. And again, if our dollars are leaving our communities, there's absolutely no way that these dollars could help to revitalize, the neighborhoods we live in. Because one of the sad ironies of all of this is that while our collective income and spending power is steady increasing, a
Mhm.
lot of the infrastructure of Black neighborhoods today is steadily declining, which again, there's a real, disconnect there. And I think as a people, we have to figure out more ways to, you know, creative ways, again, to circulate more monies in our community, because the quick one-way exit of our dollars is literally leading to, the economic destruction, and I don't think that's hyperbole to put it in those terms.
Yeah, I think you're right. When I look at even, the area of Birmingham, we have so many, it's a lot of layers of things when it comes to African Americans. And you go through the communities and you see a lot of them are, they're closing. And then in the place of that, you see other structures of counterparts being erected. And then you have crimes. I mean, it's just, I think Birmingham is number 3 in the nation as far as crimes. You have that, and then you have, lack of education. It's just a lot of layers when it comes out. You have incarceration, and we get higher sentences, and so we're in prison longer. So now we disrupted the family unit. The man is not in the home, and so it's a lot of layers to attack when it comes to building African American wealth. And so thank you so much for your information, Dr. Weems. I took some really good notes on that. And thank you for all of our listeners who are listening on today. Dr. Weems, how can people maybe email you or look or get some of your products, some of your books, or I don't know if you have a online catalog or.
Well, yeah, you can just go to Amazon, just put,
Okay.
Robert E. Weems Jr., Robert
Okay.
Weems, and my stuff will come up, and anyone that's interested in emailing me, is my email address is robert.weems
Mhm.
at wichita.edu, or you could just go to the Wichita State University website and just, put my name in the search box, and that contact information will come up.
Awesome. Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. So people, make sure you go out and support, by Dr. Robert Weems Jr. Products on Amazon. Of course, he has his email address as well if you care to contact him. I'm just going to give just a few brief announcements for our audience, Dr. Weems, and then we'll finish up. I'll have you give just maybe a couple of closing remarks, and then we'll let everybody dismiss. Okay. Okay, everyone. This year is the year 2022. Of course, our theme is the year of new beginnings. So make sure you remember that throughout the year that God is going to create some new and wonderful things in your life. Make sure you join us on Sunday as we continue the spiritual renewal sermon series from the book of Nehemiah. Also, our book of the month is Do It for a Day, how to make habits, how to break habits in 30 days or less. Make sure you're continuing to read this book of the month. Also, don't forget, if you have not received your contribution statement, they were emailed to you. So to make sure you have a current email address on file, if you did not receive it, please send us a quick email to ladypam@tcowi.org so that we can email that to you promptly. Of course, we had a great lineup this month, y'all. Make sure you go back and listen to all of our great speakers this month. So excited. We have some great speakers next month. Excited about those new topics that we're going to present. So make sure you join us every Wednesday at 12 noon Central Standard Time. And to continue to receive more great preaching and teaching from Pastor Mason, go to oneplace.com. Do a search for Dr. James H. Mason III, and then you can actually look at all of the messages. You can listen to all the messages that are even archived. He's also on podcast. So if you go to our website, at bhambc.org and scroll to the bottom, there are 6 different podcasts that he is on. Of course, it's Spotify and iTunes is one of them. So you can continue to listen to him on the go. Our prayer room call is every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 a.m. That number is 727-731-0433. Again, that's 727-731-0433. And then we will see you on next Tuesday. We are also studying the scriptures, walking through the book of James. I just love book teaching, and this is a great one as well. So join us next Tuesday at 11 o'clock a.m. Central Standard Time. And then for our small groups, we're taking a small break. We haven't finished the Transform lesson yet because, of course, this Saturday we have the Lorraine Black History Tour that's going to be going forth. And then the next Saturday, March the 5th, mark your calendars for that, is Pastor Mason's birthday. So he's going to be off on that day. So we're going to resume on March the 12th. So we're going to resume on March the 12th for the Transform small group, and then we'll start a new curriculum in April, but we'll get more information on that. Don't forget, we stream live several ways. We are on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and we are on Instagram. We also have an app called My Sunday. Of course, all you have to do is go to My Sunday from your app store. My Sunday is one word, and then you can locate Birmingham Bible Church. This way you can look at all of our events and you can actually watch services through the app. So it's a great tool to have if you're not on social media. And then to receive text messages, please text BBCWW to 94253. Text BBCWW to 94253 to receive very important text messages. If you have a business and you want to grow that business, please be a part of our business directory. Go to www.bhambc.org. You're going to actually click on the middle link, which says business directory, and then you're going to key in your information. This is free of charge. And for all of you who have a business, this not only goes to our website, but it's also part of a 50,000 plus strong database as well. So great way for anybody to see you and to locate you from any state. And so we're excited because we are finishing off this month. Of course, I've already said that we are going to the Lorraine Motel this Saturday. So we're excited about that, and just to continue to learn more about our history. And maybe they have some exhibits about what Dr. Weems had talked about. This is my first time going, so excited about that. And then coming up on March the 19th on a Saturday, 10 a.m. is our college virtual tour. We have several colleges that are going to be on, who are going to actually tell us why we should be a part of the institution, why we should apply. They're going to give you some great tips. And so for those of you who want to go online or who just want to go back to school, maybe you have some seniors in your house that you need to get some information to, this would be a great way for them to get that information so they can go to an in-person tour. But that's going to be March the 19th, Saturday at 10 a.m. No need to register. It's going to be shown on our social media pages. And of course, there are various ways you can give to Birmingham Bible Church. You can give via Givelify. Simply download the app Givelify. Do a search for Birmingham Bible Church. You can give that way. You can also mail any contributions in to P.O. Box 360-321, Birmingham, Alabama 35236. Again, that's P.O. Box 360-321, Birmingham, Alabama 35236. You can also give via text. That text number is 205-289-1938. Again, 205-289-1938. All you have to do is put a $, the amount you want to give. If it's your first time giving, a very simple registration form will follow. And then from that point on, is just $ and the amount you want to give. We also have Cash App, which is BHAM BC. So again, our Cash App is BHAM BC. Thank you for your contributions. We sponsor 12 Compassion International children. So thank you for that. Wonderful, beautiful children who are growing up. And so your gifts, your donations go towards their food, their medical supplies, their emotional needs, their educational needs, and their physical growth. Your land, your money also goes toward our land, our future. We are believing God. We are saving up monies for the land that God has for us so that we can continue to do ministry here in the Birmingham area. So special note, every 5th Sunday, we give sacrificially towards it. But that's all we have. So make sure you have an awesome week. Today, would you like to give us any closing remarks?
Yeah, Lady Pam. Again, thanks for the invite today. And you made some comments about, some of the things going on in Birmingham today. And quite frankly, we see that going on across the country. And it could be very easy to sort of fall into a state of, if not despair, but just, just not be in the best mental place. And I would just like to say, just looking at our history, and again, just to sort of tie in some of the economic history, when we as a people left the period of enslavement, most of us had little more than the clothes on our back. But within a couple generations, we had built collectively as a people, a business infrastructure, religious infrastructure, an educational infrastructure. And I would say again, if we were able to respond to those extremely tough times in such a proactive way, again, I would like to think that, notwithstanding how tough things look today, that we have it in us as a people to rise above the challenges that we're dealing with right now.
Amen. You are so right. We've had from the time of slave ships, we have endured a whole lot. And so you're right. We are strong. It's in our DNA to be strong, to be powerful, to be able to persevere through anything. And so you are so right. So take heart, everybody. Keep pushing, keep going, keep educating yourself, and just continue to have just everything that you need. We got it in us. We can do it. Don't give up. Never give up. Just keep striving and keep moving forward. So you are so right. Thank you, Dr. Weems, for that. Yes, sir. And thank you, viewers, for joining us on today. Of course, we will see you next Wednesday. This is the end of our segment, Winning Wednesday. I hope that we encouraged you, we empowered you, we just did everything. Maybe we lift your spirits, or maybe we said something to motivate you on today. So hopefully that is our desire, that is our prayer. Make sure you have a great rest of your week. Please stay safe. Please stay sane, and please stay sanitized. We love y'all. Until next time, have a good day. Bye, Dr. Weems.